I owe Golden Path for rescuing me, but honestly, I'm just here to scatter my mother's ashes.
Last but not least is AJ, and he is arguably the one that receives the most amount of criticism out of all these characters. There are fair arguments to make, such as him lacking in personality.
Then they fucked it up with Ajay Gale in Far Cry 4. One of the most blandest protagonists I've ever played.
Or not having a truly fleshed out character arc.
The protagonist of Far Cry 4 is not a retarded fuckboy, nor is he a gormless fuckwit. The inner workings of the mind of Ajay Gale remain a mystery to us. The occasional grunt or disconnected reply given to the other characters we come across providing no further insight to the personality of our main character. This is because Ajay does not have a personality, nor does he ever develop one. There is no corruption of the mind and soul of Ajay. He ruthlessly guts his enemies and witnesses atrocities without blinking, or giving the slightest indication that the things he sees or partakes in affect his mental state in the slightest.
Quebrou ele em 0,01 quebrou. Caralho, tô matando.
But these arguments are misdirected and missing the point of his character. First and foremost, he does have a character. He's just a man who has lost his mother and is returning to Kurak, his home country that he has never been to or learned about. This is a core part of his character, as him being acquainted with the West is central to the relationship with the Golden Path and his self-discovery of his cultural background and family history. The no personality argument is also not even accurate, because throughout the story, he exhibits aspects such as care for others around him, such as Batra, and even his own fucking mother, for God's sake. He's doing all of this killing for her. How does he have no motivation to do what he's doing?
AJ is even reluctant to join the Golden Path in the first place, as he felt like that wasn't what he was here to do. He was here to deliver his mother's ashes to Lakshmana, not to fight in a war that doesn't involve him.
The hostages are safe, Sabal.
You're doing your father's name proud, Ajay. This is what he wanted when he created the Golden Path, to help his people.
Look, I didn't come here for my father, or any of this.
We could still use your help, brother. Look at the difference you've made. I know, I'm asking a lot from you, but helping the Golden Path will take you to Lakshmana. I promise you that. We'll find it together.
Thanks, Sabal.
Although it's pretty subtle, AJ does display regrets of his actions throughout the game, such as with his interaction with Amita and Pagan towards the end of the game.
You? He sent you to kill me. I knew it'd come to this, but you?
Who else pulls the trigger around here?
So, who did you kill? Is it Amitabh? Sabal? Doesn't really matter. I already know. I just want to hear you say it.
Fuck you.
My goodness, boy, you didn't even blink.
AJ's own dialogue is very limited in these cutscenes. You can tell that in his tone that he's very tired. He has to ruthlessly kill others, and even members from his own side. For what? Just so he can fulfill his mother's dying wish? He didn't come here for this. He didn't come here to lead a revolution and slaughter hundreds because NPCs said so. And that was the point of the Golden Path story. The whole Golden Path side was pointless. AJ was always going to be Kirat's next ruler. And if you only stayed at the dinner table, maybe you didn't have to do all of that. Maybe AJ didn't have to go through all that pain and suffering in order to do what he needed to do in 15 minutes. AJ is shown to be stoic and calm, but he does have a sensitive side to his character, as it's evident that he's someone who is also sympathetic to those who have lost close ones, such as Noor, who was forced to do Pagan's evil business in fear of losing her family. He also lashes out at the idea of betrayal, but most of what AJ does or feel is all based on the player's own action in the game, hence the need for a more blank protagonist in order to have the player connect with AJ much more in a first-person perspective. Even if AJ didn't have a personality, or it's something you aren't really fond of, these detractors are missing the point of a silent/blank protagonist. The point of this game is not to play as Ajay Gale. You are Ajay Gale, and you connect with his journeys to learn more about your personal history, country, and make decisions along the way. Ajay serves as a vessel for the player to interact with the world, not for the player to see him as a separate entity.
So is it possible to have a protagonist that's as likable as a villain?
Well, it's a challenge, right? And it's something we're trying to do, is to actually remove layers of, I guess, barriers between the player and the protagonist. It's more about making the protagonist relatable and kind of a vessel that you can like easily step into and understand, and then show them like the antagonists, and that's what makes the antagonist powerful. And the protagonist is more allowing you to fall into the world and believe that you belong there, right? And then you can start on this journey and start to meet some of these characters, and then decide, are they good guys or bad guys, or should I trust this guy, should I trust the other guy?
Will the main character talk in this game?
Yeah, I mean, he talks when he needs to, but it was funny, when we were doing the script review, almost immediately the first thing we would do would be like, okay, so how many lines does AJ have? Like, okay, all right, cut that by 75%, and then we would review it, and then we would cut out even more. Whenever possible, we would set up a scenario where we know, or we think we know, how players would react. And so we would remove the line that the character would actually say, and then have the other person react to it. Oh, you think that, do you? In that kind of way. So they're like, oh shit, how did he know I was going to say that? Whereas if the protagonist said that line, you're like, oof, I wouldn't have said that. And then suddenly you're kind of broken out of the experience.
I'm coming for you, boss.
You think that happened a lot with Jason in 3?
Well, it's hard. It's like it's super subjective. It's like some people obviously think the way that he spoke, and other people don't. And it's kind of hard when you kind of half commit to immersing somebody in a scenario, and then kind of you can pull them out. And when the game, like when you have 6 million people play a game, it's like it's hard to hit that on the head. Whereas with an antagonist, when it's someone you're not supposed to be, it's much easier to have them say something and guarantee an emotional reaction. But when you're in first person, all you hear is this disconnected voice that might not be agreeing with what you're doing. So again, it's just about stripping away those barriers of immersion so that you can imagine yourself in this scenario.
All of this is just mostly a matter of personal preference, and you having preferences for different types of characters in your protagonist is completely fine. But critiquing something that was never meant to be there in the first place misses the point so hard, and it demeans AJ's purpose and the point of his journey. Another argument I've heard is that he doesn't display human characteristics like Jason Brody in the third game, because he doesn't react to the death of hundreds of people by his own hand, and there are no consequences for his actions.
In the other games like Far Cry 4 and 5, for example, you kill dozens of people without a second thought. I mean, the characters don't have any reaction to it whatsoever. You don't see any consequences to their actions, and they don't feel human.
Okay, guys. First of all, the point of the ending was that AJ could have reached his goal without violence, because there was really nothing to gain from it, and you only replaced the dictator with another dictator. If you still insist that AJ should have questioned his humanity, again, that wasn't the point of his story. You can't just apply one aspect from a completely different story and expect it to work in another. Far Cry 3 solely focused on the growth of Jason Brody into a merciless killer from a naive playboy from Southern California. Far Cry, in response to the criticisms of Far Cry 3's narrative, emphasized that you are going to be Ajay Gale, and not play as someone like Jason Brody, as the players found it hard to connect with him through his actions and dialogue constantly shown in the first-person perspective. The blank, somewhat quiet protagonist, in this case AJ, was a compromise between the outspoken main character versus the completely mute protagonist. Jason's arc was specifically made for the story of Far Cry 3, while AJ's character was made specifically for the story of Far Cry 4. That's the problem. People keep applying Jason's characteristics to AJ and think all these traits that Jason exhibits make him inherently a better protagonist than AJ, when it's like comparing apples and oranges. You prefer one or the other, but you can't compare two completely different things on the same standard. Their personalities are also wildly different, so I don't think having something similar to Jason's character arc and putting it onto AJ would work, because Jason is a wild as fuck rich boy, while AJ is much more stoic and seems calm in the face of loss, as he had experienced death before, as evident that he had lost his mother, someone that was really close to him. Jason's entire arc also revolves around him becoming more infatuated with killing, as he loses his sanity throughout the story, while AJ sees killing more as a means to the end, and he shows somewhat dread for what he has done towards the end of the game. The point is, AJ is supposed to connect with the player, but many disagree, and it seems that the problem with these Far Cry protagonists is that many people approach the story in such a varied manner. A lot of people hated Jason because he was such an arrogant douche and they found it hard to be invested in or connect with his story as he's constantly talking irrelevant shit in a first-person perspective. Others hate AJ because they found it boring and didn't have an engaging personality or blatant character arc as you would see in a third-person perspective. And the infamous mute protagonist in Far Cry 5 is constantly shitted on because many detractors hated that it didn't fit the narrative of Far Cry 5 and that it didn't have depth like Jason Brody. It's such a messy topic to talk about because it seems that Far Cry fans have constantly changing standards when it comes to their protagonists. But that's just my 2 cents about Ajay Gale and his role in the story. Most of the criticisms towards him are for the wrong reasons, as they should be more applied to a third person's perspective instead, because the goal of the developers wasn't for you to play as Ajay Gale. The goal was for the player to connect with Ajay Gale and have an extension of themselves in the game, while still maintaining some level of interactivity between the protagonist and other characters throughout the in-game story. People who criticize Ajay Gale more extensively often apply standards of Jason to him, and it's frankly really annoying because it's just an unfair standard to a different character. The term "every second is a story" isn't just some generic term. It's used to illustrate the player's own journey in the game and how they can make their own stories in the world of Kyrat.
Now whatever you do, Brandon, don't touch those barrels.
You are not obligated to approach a story in a certain way, but I think having a little more open-minded approach to different protagonists could really alter your own experience. Before I wrap things up, I just want to tell Pyro something real quick, so if you don't want to hear this sob story, then just skip ahead. Pyro, look. In the 1 in 7 trillion chance you see this, it's completely fine if you hate AJ. We can hate whoever we hate and like whatever we like, and the world will just be completely fine. But all I'm asking for you is to be fair. When you eventually come around to make Far Cry 4, please be fair with AJ. Don't constantly compare him and Jason because they are completely different protagonists for their own individual stories. And judging how you treat AJ in your old videos, I think you've been pretty disingenuous by simplifying him to one out of context scene and actively mocking him.
Behold the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David has prevailed to open the book and loose the 7 seals thereof.
I don't know what to say, I'm a boring protagonist.
I, of course, am pagan men.
I also don't appreciate you trying to find some ulterior motive with the developers in your recent Far Cry 3 video because you seem condescending and you highlighted them as being afraid.
Jason is my favourite Far Cry protagonist. I think after the criticism he got, Ubisoft was scared of having such a vocal character.
Hey little buddy, how are you doing? Oh my god, whoa, 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 whoa.
Oh. That's why AJ in Far Cry 4 barely speaks, and every other protagonist after that is a complete mute.
When in reality, the writers behind this game responded to criticism and just wanted to make a story you can feel a greater connection to. Again, it's perfectly fine if you still don't like AJ after your retrospective, but the least you can do is provide some level of understanding of the developer's motives and critiquing their execution, instead of comparing AJ to something you already have a strong bias to. That's all I have for you, Pyro. If you're watching this, I really appreciate it, but please don't send your audience any hate towards me. I'm just some kid who just wants to open discussion for Far Cry's narrative, and I felt like Far Cry 4 was especially getting unfair treatment. What I'd really appreciate is you to be a little more open-minded to the protagonists of these games. Maybe look at 5 or 4 at a different angle next time. That's all I have for you. Thank you. In conclusion, Far Cry 4 deserves much more credit than it has received over the past years ever since its release. It was often ridiculed as a watered down version of Far Cry 3, and although more and more people are appreciating the existence of this entry, the scars of war still remain, to the point where this video really needed to be made. Hearing these arguments constantly repeated all over the internet just gets irritating, and I personally waited for other Far Cry YouTubers to do it for me. Having played the game and knowing that no one else is going to make a video defending this game in a long time, this was a passionate project that I've waited months to do, and I finally got off my fat ass to write and edit this. I literally had to torture myself to watch these videos, and I'm thankful for myself for being able to push through this hell. I also want to create more room for discussion and break up what is the popular opinion that Far Cry 3 has the best narrative while providing more insight into the narratives of other Far Cry games. Thank you for watching this video. Well, you can hit subscribe if you want. I'll do more videos like this, often in response to different critiques of media I like. I might do a fairy tale one, or make videos analyzing the narratives of other Far Cry games in the future if y'all like. Comment down below, or share to your friends. Again, thank you for your attention, and I'll see y'all in hell.